it's Brandy from Brush by Brandy, and you guys are live here on my YouTube channel with another weekly painting tutorial. This week we're going to be working on this pair of side tables. I've had these in my inventory for quite a long time, and nobody ever paid attention to them, so I'm going to pull them out and work on them myself. Because these are not for a customer, I can do any finishes I want, which is becoming a rarity these days, but it's kind of nice to just be able to pull them out and do anything that I feel the piece speaks to me on. So I decided that I wanted to use my Silk all-in-one mineral paint. So Silk is a paint that does not require a primer or a top coat. And I think it's going to be beautiful to give these tables a nice clean and modern look. They really have these sleek legs, and I really want to kind of emphasize that. So as always with any piece, I start by removing my hardware and giving them a good cleaning with Dixie Belle White Lightning. It is recommended with silk to always give your piece a scuff sanding, and so I'm just using one of my Surf Prep rad pads, and I'm going over the entirety of these, just scuffing the surface, taking down any gloss on the existing finish. At this point, I had already used my Surf Prep sander to go ahead and sand the tops down to bare wood. I knew that I wanted to do something with those tops, I just wasn't sure yet. The color I chose for these is one of my favorites in the silk line. I'm so drawn to this color. It's this beautiful graphite color called Black Sands. I think it's universal, could really go with any decor, but it also has this really clean, crisp, a little bit of even a masculine feel to it. It's so funny, on some pieces you find inspiration in the most random places, and in these, it was when I sanded down the tops and then I started getting the black sands on the bottom, it kind of came together for me. I saw the seams in the wood that was used to make the tops, and it looked like a butcher block, and so I thought, you know what, I'm going to do an exaggerated butcher block on the top of these. So that was when the look kind of started coming together. It kind of starts free flowing. For me, a lot of times I get these messages from people that want to know what they should do with a piece just by looking at it. I don't always just look at a piece and know what I'm going to do. It has to start somewhere. I either start with some piece of inspiration, whether it's a transfer or a paper or a fabric or something in the room. You can use those for inspiration. In this case, it came from the actual structure of the piece itself, the seams in the wood, and then the color that I knew that I wanted to use for the body. This color gives it a little bit of a masculine feel, and I think that's really going to tie together with the exaggerated butcher block top. The top is also going to add that nice accent, so where the bodies are a little bit simple and plain and sleek, the top is where it really gets a little bit fun on this piece. All right, so now that I've got my piece scuff sanded and cleaned, I'm going to go ahead and use my Dixie Belle Mini, and I'm just laying on a coat of my Silk all-in-one paint. Silk is a little bit different than the chalk mineral paint that you see me use. I'm not going to use water with this paint. It's not as friendly to water as the chalk mineral line is. I also want to point out that I don't need to use a primer on these. So Silk has a built-in stain blocker, and these are made of oak. So normally if I was painting these in, say, a light color, I would want to go ahead and use a stain blocking primer. But because I'm using Silk, it's not required on these. I get to skip that step, which is really nice. Let's talk a little bit about water with silk, because I see a lot of questions on that. So silk has resins in the paint, and that's what makes it not require a clear coat, which is a really nice feature. But if you've ever worked with resins, you know that they are not friendly to water. They can actually start to bubble and foam and pull, and things like that happen when you use resins with water. So I also know that working with resin, you can use a very minimal amount of water and it won't affect it. So the key to using water with silk is if you need to use it, you can. You can dampen your brush if you need to. It just needs to be an ever so minimal amount of water. That is the reason that you can dilute silk up to 10% if you need to spray it. On these side tables, I did decide to go ahead and finish the inside and the outside of the drawer as well as the underside of the tables. And the reason I did that is because they're so leggy that I found from some angles you could actually see up underneath the table. And so I wanted that to look finished as well. So I did paint the underside of my drawer, all inside the boxes, and the underside of the tables on these. This is my favorite part of these pieces, so let's talk about working on these tops. I sanded them down to bare wood, they're nice and clean and smooth, and now I'm going to use my painter's tape and I'm just going to tape off lines. I'm actually using the seams in the wood itself as a guide for where I'm going to place these lines. They were kind of randomly spaced seams, and I like that because it's going to give me randomly spaced lines in my Faux Butcher Block top. I chose to not do these tops identical. They both have a little bit different tops on them in the order of the colors that I went in and the size of the stripes. The reason I did that is because I feel like they have a little bit of a modern look with the really slim tapered leg, and so I feel like the asymmetrical design actually suits them. All right, so I'm just taping off those randomly spaced lines using the seams of the wood as a guide, and I'm going to make sure that I burnish down the tape. And this just means rubbing down all of the edges because I'm going to be using Voodoo Gel Stain, which is a water-based gel stain. It's a little bit thinner, and I don't want it to seep underneath my tape. I also want to wrap the edges, so I made sure that I burnished the tape all the way around the edges of the table. You could really use any width of tape for this. I'm using a wider painter's tape, but any width would really work. I'm going to be using 4 colors of Voodoo Gel Stain on these tops, and I also want to alternate in the natural wood color on them as well. The 4 colors of Voodoo Gel Stain I'm going to be using are Up in Smoke, Black Magic, White Magic, and Tobacco Road. So it's a gray, a white, a black, and then a soft brown. I started out applying my Voodoo Gel Stain just using an old rag, and then I did alternate and change it over to a chip brush. I just found that the chip brush applied it a little bit heavier, and I wanted these colors to be emphasized, so the chip brush worked better for me than the sock did. So when applying the Voodoo Gel Stain, I just alternated my colors a little bit. I applied them purely randomly. The only things I made sure to do were to alternate. So if I had a dark color, I kind of alternated that with some light colors next to it for contrast. And then I also made sure that I didn't apply the same color right next to itself twice. Here's where you're going to see me switching to that chip brush. So I just take the applicator bottle of the Voodoo Gel Stain and I just squirted it onto my table in stripes. And then I use that chip brush to kind of brush it out. Now Voodoo Gel Stain gets a little bit sticky as it starts setting up. And so as it got a little bit sticky, I was able to kind of smooth out the brush strokes from the brush and get a smooth application. Some of my lids on my Voodoo Gel Stain were a little bit clogged. So in those cases, I just poured it onto my table. I need to go wash out a few of these lids. I'm just pulling the tape off as I go, and that's to make sure that I don't tear any of the edges when I pull the tape off after it's dry. If I pull it off while it's still wet, I make sure that I'm not going to have any ripped edges on my Voodoo Gel Stain when I pull it. All right, so let's go ahead and go on to our second table. I'm going to apply the stripes the same way, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how I'm going to do my next set of stripes. Once I had my first set of stripes on both tables, I came back and I replaced my tape down up against my dried Voodoo Gel Stain so that I could create the same stripes in between. The only tip I have here is also to make sure that you burnish down those edges. And then I had a hard time making sure that I got exactly up to the line that the previous stripe was. So I ended up coming back with just an artist brush and a little bit of my Voodoo Gel Stain, and I just touched up anywhere I had a little bit of the wood showing in between the stripes. This got me perfectly clean lines. That was really important on this look. So you can notice here how I made sure that I didn't put any colors right next to each other. I got nice variation, and then I left some of my stripes undone as well. And this gave me the natural wood color peeking through. With all my striped tops done, I set them aside to dry, and now I'm going to come down and I want to just add a golden foot onto the bottom of these legs. They're so slim and tapered. I think the gold really sets off these legs. I'm just using my Dixie Belle Gemstone mousse. I went ahead and taped off a straight line around the bottom of each leg, and it did end up taking me 2 coats of mousse to get the coverage that I wanted, but it's this nice, rich, bright gold. In the color gold, the gemstone mousse is a really thick formula, so I just add a little bit of water to help it glide on easier. I also chose new hardware for these pieces, and they're wood with that gold accent. They literally make the piece. I picked these pulls up at Hobby Lobby. The body of these does not require a top coat because I use the silk paint, but I am going to go ahead and seal these tops in using Dixie Belle Satin Clear Coat. I'm just wiping it on with my blue sponge. Here's the finished product on these. They're sleek and modern and beautiful. I'm thrilled with how they turned out. It's a toss-up between the tops and the hardware on these, but they just make the piece. They really go together extremely well. These tables are full of happy accidents. Everything just kind of came together as I went. I didn't really have a direction when I started, but I love how they turned out. You can find links for all the products I used on these pieces in the description for this post. You can also find more Brushed by Brandy on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, and my website at brushedbybrandy.com.